Okay.
So one of the most interesting cases when I was at Sidley was when we got a phone call from a student of one of the professors at Georgetown, Pam Harris, who's now on the Fourth Circuit. And the student was working with the Council on Arab-Islamic Relations as an intern. And they knew about a young man who was being detained in Egypt. And Pam Harris had suggested that they call us to see if we could provide representation. And the story was this young man was, his family was originally from Somalia, and they had come to the United States, and the young man was born in the United States, so he was a United States citizen. And he grew up in Virginia, and he was, as he grew up, as he was reaching adulthood, he made some bad decisions. And his parents thought he would be better off if they sent him to a Muslim country where he would, where he could get educated in the Muslim religion, learn Arabic, and learn to walk the straight and narrow path. So his parents sent him to Yemen. And while he was in Yemen, he met somebody who knew Anwar al-Awlaki, who was the imam who was an agitator for Islamic Jihad, and it was eventually killed by a drone, a US drone. But our client was just friends with this kid who was one of the disciples of Anwar al-Awlaki, the imam. So, and he was not involved in any sort of violent activity at all. But he was fairly unsophisticated, so he didn't know who he was spending time with. So when he and his brother tried to come back to the United States, the FBI stopped him in Egypt, in Cairo, and would not let him get on the plane to the United States. And this was a US citizen who was not being allowed to return to the country. And he was detained for several weeks in a Cairo jail. And the Cairo police are not known for being terribly kind or considerate of their prisoners, and so his parents were extremely worried. And we figured out, we heard that the FBI had told him that he couldn't get on a plane. He was now on a no-fly list, and he said, well, how am I going to get home? And they told him that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, so you can do that in 2012 or whatever it was, which was not very helpful for a 25-year-old man who didn't know how to get from Cairo back to Northern Virginia. So I was able to contact somebody in the division, the National Security Division at the Department of Justice, and explain that we were representing this young man, trying to figure out what was going on. And we basically agreed with one of the attorneys in the National Security Division that if you let him come back, we will make him available for questioning. But he's a US citizen. You can't keep him indefinitely in another country being detained by the FBI. So they agreed that he could come back. And then when he got back to New York, his family went up to pick him up, and he was detained by Customs and Border Patrol in New York because the DOJ didn't necessarily have control over what Homeland Security was doing. So I was able to talk to the woman who's the ombudsman at Department of Homeland Security and say, you know, you've got to talk to your guys. We have an agreement with DOJ that he can be questioned, but he has to come back. So they eventually released him. He came home. His family was very happy. And then we had an interview with the Department of Homeland Security people, with DOJ's National Security Division, and with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Virginia. And it was really interesting sitting in that interview because through the questions you realized why they were suspicious of him because of the people that he had had contact with. And I was convinced that, you know, they would not have been doing their job if they hadn't questioned him. But I also was thoroughly convinced that you can't do that to a U.S. citizen. You have to let them come back to the United States, and you have to afford them counsel. The FBI discouraged him from getting a lawyer when he was in Egypt. So he came, so he was questioned, and nothing ever happened. He was released. The one thing they did, because he was in Egypt for a while in a hotel, they had taken his passport, and they wouldn't give his passport back until he paid for the hotel while he was being detained in Cairo, and I don't think he ever got that money back. But it was an incredibly interesting glimpse into the national security arena and what was going on with Yemen and other countries that they viewed as terrorist threats.
Wow.